Welcome everyone very much for joining us today. This very important discussion on World Sleep Day in conjunction with Lived Experience Australia. My name is Moira Junga and I'm a health psychologist and the inaugural CEO of the Sleep Health Foundation. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on today, the people of the Kulin Nation, for me here in Yarraville in the inner west of Melbourne. It's primarily the land of the Boon, Wurrung and Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung peoples, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to any Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Their deep connection to land, sky and community reminds us of the importance of rest, well-being, health and balance. Today we're bringing together two important global observances. World Sleep Day is an annual event that shines a light on the importance of healthy sleep, something so fundamental to our physical, mental and emotional well-being, yet so often overlooked and undervalued. And International Women's Day, which was last weekend, is a global celebration of the achievements, resilience and contributions of women, while also recognising the inequities that still exist. Bringing these 2 days together gives us a powerful lens to explore how sleep, gender, health and lived experience intersect. We're incredibly fortunate to have our three panel members with us today. Thank you for your time, your openness, your willingness to share your experiences, Beck, Di and Lisa. I thank them so much for their generosity joining us today on the panel, and they'll be introduced properly soon. I also want to briefly tell you about the Sleep Health Foundation. We are Australia's leading community-facing advocate for sleep health and awareness and provision of resources. Our work aims to help individuals, workplaces and communities understand why sleep matters and how we can support healthier sleep across the population. And thanks, of course, to everyone in the audience for joining us. Your interest in this conversation is what makes events like this meaningful and possible. You will see the Q&A function. We don't have the chat function live during the webinars, but please pop your questions in as we go. And there'll be plenty of time at the end of the panel discussion to have these questions answered. We'll be monitoring that. Just wanted a couple of words, just one more 30 seconds or so, that this is not a medical advice session. There's not really a clinical focus, and our panelists and facilitators are not clinicians. Our panelists are here to share their personal stories, unique, honest and diverse. We won't be providing individual clinical guidance or diagnosing sleep or mental health concerns. However, we'll make sure you leave the webinar today with links to reputable information, services and programs. And at the end of the webinar, so you can explore support options if you need them. So with all that, let's settle in, listen generously, and I look forward to a conversation that's thoughtful, human and grounded in lived experience. And I hand over to I was going to say the CEO, but I think you've got a different title, the head of Lived Experience Australia, Professor Sharon Lawn. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you very much, Moira, and hello everyone. Thank you for joining. This is a really important topic for me. I'm coming to you from Ghana lands in Adelaide, South Australia, and paying my respects to elders past, present and emerging here too. This particular topic is a really important one for me personally, with lived experience of sharing a life with a CPAP machine and a family member around sleep issues, but also Lived Experience Australia is a national representative lived experience and family organisation for people who experience mental health challenges, and physical health and mental health is crucially important to be seen as the one thing, not two separate things. And sleep is a crucial part of the lives of people who have experience with mental health issues. So I'm really looking forward to today and hearing from Beck, Di and Lisa about their experiences. The work that we do at Lived Experience Australia is very much around advocating for lived experience voice in particularly in evidence. So we reach out to people like many people I gather on the call today and our panelists to add that voice to the evidence base, because as we know, traditionally, lived experience voices have not been part of the development of understanding of many health conditions. So I hope you enjoy today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from people as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Sharon and Moira. It's great to be here today with everybody. So my name's Jenny, and I am co-chair of our lived experience panel at Sleep Health Foundation. So I just wanted to take a moment to introduce and talk about the lived experience group that we have here at the Sleep Health Foundation. So we have a group that's called the Lived Experience Advisory Partners. So we call ourselves LEAP. And the role of this group is to provide strategic and advisory input to the Sleep Health Foundation board on matters relating to advocacy, education, partnerships, and research to ensure that the consumer voice and perspectives are heard and at the core of all Sleep Health Foundation activities. So it really is about raising awareness and advocating for the voices of people with lived experience of sleep disorders in all the work that we do. And we're delighted today to have three women from our lived experience advisory panel who are going to be sharing your stories or their stories with you here today. So we've got Rebecca, Di, and Lisa. And they're going to be answering a series of questions with us here today, which will tell you about their sleep health stories and the treatment journey that they've gone about. And they're going to give you some tips and advice for, possibly improving your own sleep health. So I am just delighted that they are happy to talk with us today. It's really exciting to be having people share their own personal stories, and I'm just welcoming them here today. So next we're going to have Charlotte, who's also on the Lived Experience Advisory Panel as a co-chair. She's going to give us a bit of an update and overview about sleep health in women, and then we'll go into the panel discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Jenny. So I'm not going to talk for too long, but just wanted to set the scene and provide some context that I'm sure we all know, we all experience these things as women, but what really is the context for this sort of a webinar and women and sleep health. So sleep changes across the lifespan, and there are hormonal changes and experiences that women have that impact and interact with our sleep. So starting our menstrual cycle, and 7 in 10 women say that sleep changes just before their period. We experience behavioral and hormonal changes. Pregnancy, so less deep sleep, more night awakenings, particularly during the last 3 months of pregnancy. Going into postpartum, where up to 90%, so most new mothers are reporting poor sleep quality. Um, we do find that there's plenty of studies on women receiving 7 hours of sleep per night still, or not per night, but per 24 hours. But this is often really broken up sleep, so sleep quality is really impacted during this time. And then peri and post menopause later in life, so 40 to 60% of women experiencing sleep disturbance, and up to 87% of women experiencing hot flushes and night sweats, so really impacting sleep in that stage as well. Going into older age, so older adults requiring the same amount of sleep as younger adults. So I think there's a sort of misconception that we need less sleep when we age. It's the same similar sleep need, but we know that sleep is impacted by chronic illness and medications. There's a higher frequency of napping and a higher risk of sleep disorders in this age group as well. So without that all sounding too much like a terrible story, just going through what that context is for women's sleep health. In terms of sleep disorders, so women have a 40% increased risk for developing insomnia, twice the risk for restless leg syndrome, and also experience different obstructive sleep apnea symptoms, so more partial obstructions during sleep compared to men. So the presentation of symptoms can be different, and that can often mean that sleep disorders are underdiagnosed in women. And we've got some quotes as well from some of our lived experience members that highlight some of these issues. So experience persistent fatigue, brain fog, and difficulty concentrating, which impacts productivity, focus, and performance at work. At home, being exhausted makes it harder to manage responsibilities with patience and energy as a mother. Emotionally, the condition is draining and creates anxiety around bedtime, along with frustration at not being able to rest properly. So, really highlighting those difficulties. Sleep doesn't feel restorative, it feels like another challenge. Um, and that this idea of sort of being shocked by sleep disorders, so shocked that it wasn't just laziness and that it had a name and there were people who had done research about it. It didn't even cross my mind there were people that specialised in sleep disorders. So the importance of that awareness as well. So we're going to move into chatting with our wonderful lived experience members, and we're starting off with Beck. And like Jenny and Moira have said, we're just going to have a bit of time chatting to each member about experiences. Thank you very much for joining us, Beck. This is a lovely background you've got. So starting out, can you give us or describe a bit about your sleep disorder and your experience with sleep and how it's impacting your daily life?
So I've been diagnosed with severe obstructive sleep apnea. What it has changed since I have been treated for it is I no longer have the severe muscle pains, especially in my legs, that I was experiencing. A constant sore throat that I lived with through COVID. Got so sick of that question, have you got a sore throat? Because I knew full well it wasn't COVID. It disappeared after I started therapy, amazingly. And getting up and going to the toilet several times a night also disappeared. So it's been so fantastic being able to sleep right through. So yeah, so not necessarily the standard symptoms that people think of that go, hey, you've got a sleep problem, because I'm the first to admit I always used to get about 8 hours of sleep, and it took me like 30 seconds to go to sleep. I slept wonderfully. But yeah, obviously I wasn't.
Yeah, and so did you recognize that those symptoms that you're experiencing were perhaps an underlying sleep problem, or was it something that sort of was presented to you?
How it actually came about for me was I actually got a job as a sleep apnea consultant. And so while I still didn't really recognize them as, to be able to go, oh, you should consider sleep apnea. It was actually picked up when I bought a machine home to start playing around with, a CPAP machine, to see what my clients were going through and, test out settings and stuff. That it all started to sort of click and go, I think there might be a issue. And then, yeah, it was a couple of months later down the track, I actually went and did an official sleep study. And yeah, it came back that I was severe. I was having something like 44 events per hour in my normal sleep. So I'm like, wish I had thought about this earlier, as most people tell me.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you brought it home to try and then were not expecting a result.
Yeah, pretty much, because I slept great.
Yeah. And so thinking about your journey and the sort of way you got to a diagnosis, what sort of message or advice would you have for someone else worried about their sleep?
Even if you're not worried about your sleep, but you've got symptoms that medically they can't find anything wrong with you, because it's quite a common thing that comes up, I would say go and get a test done, even if it's not like there's a couple of different levels of tests. There is a test without a referral, so you can just go and get it done just to see for your own thing what's happening during the night. I would recommend go do it, because I've spent years with symptoms that I didn't have to, and lots of money on different specialists to be told that there's nothing wrong with me. So my thoughts is that, if you've got something that's unexplained, maybe, and especially as you guys mentioned before, for us women, sleep apnea, it just throws up different symptoms. So that's, I would find somebody to speak to about whether and it's one night of your life that you sleep with a cannula up your nose and a pulse ox on your finger. It's not hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important around the symptoms being different. And I think a really interesting part of your story is that it wasn't necessarily that you were thinking you had something wrong with your sleep.
Mm.
Um, would you mind or feel comfortable going into a bit more detail about what symptoms, now that you look back, were sort of related
Um,
to the OSA?
yeah, so looking back, it would be for me, the muscle pains, especially in my thighs. It was just horrific some days. And the sore throat, which they had actually told me was from silent reflux, which no, it wasn't. Um, and yeah, the getting up and needing to urinate multiple times during the night, which I have tested again because if I've gone camping and haven't taken my CPAP machine with me, yeah, it's a horrible night because I am. It's what the brain does. It employs the bladder. Goes, you need some oxygen. Let's get you up and about. Um, so yeah, and I don't nap as much in the afternoon now when I get a chance. I would never have really put that down to it so much, but and I do find I can actually stay up a little bit later, whereas, I was crawling into bed sort of by about 8:30. I now tend to crawl into bed about
Yeah.
9:30. But I am up at like 5 o'clock in the morning. So it's just that, yeah, 7.5 hours is now what I find works well for me. But yeah, so they were the main things that I noticed a change. Not so much in energy levels or anything like that, unfortunately. But yeah, but they've made a huge difference in how I live. I don't take anywhere near the amount of anti-inflammatory medication
Mm.
or things like that now. So that's been a huge bonus.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think really great advice and really useful around thinking through what could be going on that's not just what we think of when we think of sleep, and
Yeah.
how much you can improve things.
Yep.
Yeah.
And can I just let people know, just really quickly,
Mm.
CPAP is not the only option for treatment. That's one thing that I learned becoming a consultant. There's lots of other things that can be done before. So if you're really stressed about, oh, I've got to, wear a machine to bed, it might not be the case. So don't let that put you off investigating whether you've got it as well. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Beck. I'll hand over to Jenny now, and we're going to hear from Di next.
Charlotte, and thanks, Rebecca. That was super interesting. So, now I'm going to talk to Di, and thank you, Di, for joining me today. And just going to ask you the same question. So, can you please describe your sleep disorder and the impact that this has had on your daily life?
Sure. I have been living with narcolepsy type 1 since childhood, and I didn't receive a diagnosis until I was 49, so that was quite some time to not have an answer. So for decades, I was experiencing profound exhaustion and excessive daytime sleepiness without understanding that that wasn't normal. I honestly thought that everybody woke up feeling tired, so I didn't know any different. If you don't know any different, well then, it's just the way it is. Having excessive daytime sleepiness meant that I tended to fall asleep suddenly and uncontrollable. So right from school, especially in high school, I would be falling asleep in class, and then I'd be struggling to get through the day, and then I'd just drag myself home and then just collapse in my bedroom. It didn't matter what the weather was. It could be stinking hot, and it didn't matter. I'd just die for a few hours. Over the years, it's become more and more difficult to focus on tasks and just to get through the day. So basically, it's debilitating and challenging, and it reduces the quality of my life.
Yeah, thanks, Di. It does. It sounds like a really challenging disorder, and yeah, been a really difficult, long pathway. So it'd be interesting to hear a little bit about your help seeking and treatment pathway, because you mentioned that the symptoms started when you were a child and you got diagnosed at 49. So that's, that's a really long time. So do you want to just talk a little bit more about the help seeking and, what happened in that treatment journey?
Well, I know that when I was a teenager, my mother took me to the doctor, and the doctor did blood tests and that sort of thing, and they weren't sure what was going on there. They couldn't find an actual reason for it, so it just got dismissed. And as I got older and had a family, mentioned the fact that I was tired. Now, that's an important word not to use, because if I'd been saying that I was sleepy all day, I might have got somewhere a bit quicker. But I was saying that I was tired, and you're expected to be tired when you're a mum and you're working and you're raising a family and you're trying to look after the house. So we tend to be dismissed quite a bit. So after years of having my concerns dismissed and misdiagnoses, I was diagnosed with depression. Well, I wasn't really depressed. I'd mentioned that I was falling down. Like, I was just so exhausted and I was falling down randomly and things like that, but nothing came from that. Just got diagnosed with depression. And I was eventually finally diagnosed with narcolepsy type 1 accidentally, because by this stage I was in my 40s, early 40s, and I thought I was going nuts. So I was chatting with a psych, and eventually he said, you could try modafinil, but it's a private group, it's going to be expensive, blah blah blah. And back then it was a lot more expensive than what it is now. And I tried it at the minimum dose, and I did have some improvement in my wakefulness. And I then mentioned that to my neurologist, who said, well, the only way to get that via the PBS is if you have narcolepsy. And he's going, oh, I'll send you to the respiratory clinic. And he sent me there, and I'm thinking, narcolepsy? Like, I only knew about narcolepsy through the movies. You see people randomly falling down on the ground, or they face first in a plate of food. So in these hilarious situations, but believe me, there's nothing funny about having narcolepsy. So I was really going, oh, I don't have narcolepsy. This is just going to be a waste of my time. And I did the overnight, the PSG. And in the morning, when I was about to start the multiple sleep latency test, I tried to leave the clinic because I was so adamant that I didn't have narcolepsy. And thankfully, they talked me into staying, because if they didn't, I might still not have an answer. So yes, I definitely fit the criteria for having narcolepsy. The first specialist that I had prescribed me with Dex. And when I went back to her and I mentioned that it wasn't working very well, she questioned my diagnosis rather than considering trying another medication or trying another dosage or what have you. And part of that is because I'm seeing, well, here in Australia, we get sent to see somebody in a respiratory clinic, and many of the specialists who are working there are dealing with sleep apnea and things like that, and a lot haven't even had a patient with narcolepsy. So it's really difficult to find somebody who is knowledgeable in that area. So I decided that because of that whole limited awareness, it was up to me to advocate for myself. So I had joined a few Facebook groups and, started asking, okay, anyone in Adelaide, does anybody know of anybody that, is knowledgeable about narcolepsy? And I was given a name for a specialist who I then started to see. So unfortunately, like, the current treatment options here aren't perfect. I only find them to be partially effective. Like, they reduce my sleepiness during the day, but it doesn't get rid of it altogether. So I take wake-promoting medications to reduce my sleepiness, and an antidepressant for the cataplexy. And that just sort of dulls my emotions. I don't like having to take an antidepressant when I'm not depressed, So I don't, sorry, I've got to have a drink. Get thirsty from taking these weight-promoting medications all day too. I don't drive long distances. I don't drive in the heat. And and I don't drive when I'm feeling sleepy because it's just too risky. I don't want to be the cause of an accident and potentially, kill somebody just because I chose to drive when I knew that I shouldn't be. I avoid agreeing to do anything really, if I can help it, before lunchtime to give my brain time to sort of wake up and start functioning. And I often let my family down by not being able to attend functions or help them to do things just due to my excessive daytime sleepiness, and that just being so random as to, every day's a new, like, flip the coin, what's going to be today. So it doesn't help with trying to plan anything. I sleep as much as anybody else, but because my sleep is so active, I'm not having the restorative sleep that I need. So the quality of my sleep in the past few decades has eventually led to other health conditions as well. What we really need here is affordable access to medications such as sodium oxybate, but although it's available here, it's not on the PBS. So the barriers to sodium oxybate with the cost of it means that I believe only around about 50 people are currently using it here in Australia. But of course, if you see a specialist in a public hospital in WA, you've actually got a lot better chance of gaining access. But that's a whole nother story. We won't go there. Yeah. So it's just really hard because the treatment shouldn't be reliant on our postcode and our size of our wallets.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of challenges there. And, thanks for sharing that. I was actually just thinking, you mentioned the multiple sleep latency test. I wondered if it would be helpful for people for you to talk a little bit about the test that you went through, because it is quite an unusual test. So it might be interesting for people to hear about that, do you think?
No worries. Yeah, so every 2 hours they send you to have a nap. And that nap is for 20 minutes. And they're monitoring how long it takes you to fall asleep, firstly, and then if you enter into REM sleep. So you have to enter into REM sleep between in a particular amount of time to twice, I believe, to be able to be qualified to be diagnosed with narcolepsy. So yes, I definitely managed to do that. Normally it can be up to 5 naps, but most people with narcolepsy have qualified after they've done the 4th one. So they don't have to stay around for the 5th one. Yeah. And some people don't end up falling, like going into REM, but that might not be because they haven't got narcolepsy. It could also be other factors. So things going on in the environment in the clinic when they're trying to do the test, or they could still be taking medications and haven't been advised not to take those medications before they do the test, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's pretty tricky.
Yeah, no, thanks. I just thought it was interesting to, talk a bit more about that, because it is a very unusual test that most people wouldn't have heard of.
Yeah, I
So
didn't want to spend my day there. I'm thinking, you want me to stay here that long, all day? Well, I've got things to do. I haven't got narcolepsy. Get me out of here.
Yeah. So what would be your top message or piece of advice for somebody who was worried about their sleep?
Okay, well, if you're experiencing sleepiness like this and during the day, and it's been ongoing for quite some time, not just randomly, but like constant sort of sleepiness, and there's no obvious cause, and you're well, apart from that, you're well and healthy and you're well rested, it may be an indication that there's a sleep disorder involved. So you should talk to your health professional. And when you do, make sure if it is sleepiness, say that you're sleepy. Don't say that you're tired. Because there's a big difference between those two words. Before you go, I really suggest that you keep a sleep diary for 2 weeks beforehand. And that way you can take in that evidence on a piece of paper and give it to your doctor and say, okay, this is what's been happening for the past 2 weeks, so that they can actually see it in front of them. Now, that's going to help them to decide whether you might need to have what's going on investigated further. So the sort of things you need to keep in the diary is the time that you went to bed, when you fell asleep, the time that you woke up and got out of bed, how many times you woke up during the night, and how refreshed you feel in the morning when you do finally wake up and get out of bed. Things like if you'd had any heavy meals the night before, or if you drank any alcohol, had coffee later in the day, or there's any medications that you're taking as well, they all need to be noted. And as well as if you've needed to have any naps during the day, and what your like fatigue levels were like each day. If you can keep that, so keep a diary, keep it by the side of your bed so that you do remember to fill it in as soon as you wake up. And yeah, 2 weeks, and then take it with you.
It's great. Really good advice. Really nice practical advice. Something that people can actually take away and do, which is, and yeah, sleep diary is an excellent idea. I think that's great. I really loved your comment about language too, because I think that, the words that you use, and, there are lots of words, tired, sleepy, fatigued, all these different words that they do have different meanings. So I like that raised that point as well, which is really interesting. Thanks, Di. It's been great chatting with you today. So I think now I'll hand over to Sharon, who's going to talk to Lisa.
Great. Thanks, Jenny, and thanks, Di. Fascinating crossovers with silos and systems and some of the challenges already. So, Lisa, I'm really looking forward to hearing your experience of sleep disorder and the impact on your daily life.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. So I was finding that I'd never had an issue with sleep before, and I was finding that I was feeling really tired in the morning and having to go to bed really early, but I still wasn't having a really good sleep. And I actually started having secret naps at work in my lunch break. Like I would actually have to go, like I was just gonna die. So I just had to go in a quiet meeting room and have a nap on my lunch break. Like that was more important than food to me. And I just couldn't figure out why. I thought maybe menopause or something. But then I was working with a domestic violence support worker, and that's when we sort of realized that I'd been going through sleep abuse as one aspect of the domestic violence situation that I was in. And then combined with all the coercive control and having um, just very heightened responses because of walking on eggshells and yeah, the many factors that come with domestic and family violence. My nervous system was really, really heightened, and so yeah, I had to. It was only when I left the relationship that all the fog lifted, and I didn't need those naps anymore. And but it did take some time for my nervous system to readjust, so I still needed help ongoing there.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying, that it sounds like you were, there were other potential reasons like the menopause or the stress that you were under in your personal life that could easily have been explaining to yourself, but also potentially other people who you might have been starting to think, well, what is this? Um, so how did you go about help seeking when did you start to think this might be something to do with sleep, and what was that help seeking like when you were on that journey?
Yeah, so it was all eye-opening to me because I hadn't even heard of the terms coercive control, sleep abuse, things like this. It was just out of my I knew about
Mm,
domestic violence, but I mean, I guess I knew of coercive control, but we don't know the intricacies of it and if you look at the power and control wheel and all the ways that you can be abused, by
mm,
technology, health, sleep, finances, everything. And yeah, I just started working with when I realized that I had my partner had placed a tracking device in my car,
mm,
I worked with a domestic violence support worker, and she thankfully found it after some time, which was amazing. But you can imagine that I felt quite violated, betrayed,
mm,
things like that. So there was a lot of that obviously to get over. But then, yeah, as I say, it wasn't until I actually just left that my sleep improved, but I still had all that trauma to work through. So it was a matter of going through a GP first, as well as the support team, and then getting ongoing counselling and seeing a psychologist and realizing what was going on, and learning really meaningful techniques and strategies on how to work through the heightened state that I was in. And I also got a great resource from my GP, which was I think it was This Way Up or something. It was like this online program, which I think because she prescribed it, it was free, and it was really cute and simple. It was like a little bit clunky, but it just had really cool tips and tricks on sleep hygiene, and then finding out this website. And I'm just like, yeah, I was amazed, like all the resources out there. Like, but it was the intersection of, I think, the sleep health and the domestic violence where that came into play, and that's where I really found the resources that were right for me.
Yeah, there's certainly there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and over time it sounds like this was more than just the the things that were happening in your life. It was actually having a real impact in the longer term, and it sounds like even after you were hooked into the sleep issue, your body still had a period of time where it had to then really adjust and repair.
That's right.
As well. Yeah. So what are the top messages that you would like other people to know about your experience? And it's all three of you have had such a diverse and different experience of sleep and other things going on in your lives. Someone who's worried about sleep, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say always trust your instinct. No one knows your body like you, just like Di was saying. And if it's not sounding right, just keep chasing it up. Same as Beck. Similar messages coming through. Sometimes women, we get told, oh, it's just menopause. Oh, you're at that right age. It's this, it's that. But if it's not feeling right, like I didn't understand that I was going through a domestic violence situation. I didn't realize that at first as well, and I didn't understand about the sleep abuse. And so I'm glad that I just kept persisting, and I would say to other people, no one knows you like you. Like, please continue. I know it's quite stressful and it's draining. You've got all these other things. We're often females are the carers for, we're the sandwich generation, right? We're looking after elderly parents, looking after kids. We do all the most of the housework, we do the cooking, cleaning, everything, and work full time. So we manage all this and trying to sleep. Like, it is a lot, but don't let that be explained to you as an excuse. Like, if it's not right, please persist, and please persist until you get the support that you need.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. I think what you've very nicely done is brought us to not just the issues around sleep, but the issues for women and sleep, and the experiences across the system for women is a particularly specific thing that may happen in your experience of help seeking and needing to stand your ground and say something's not right here. So thank you very much. I'll hand back to Jenny, and keen to hear from the audience.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, Di, and Beck. It's been just so interesting hearing your stories. And, as Sharon's pointed out, your three stories are so different, and everybody's, every single person's story is different. That's what we find all the time in working in sleep health. So I think this has really highlighted three unique stories, and but there are some common themes and messages across all of them. So, I think it's really just highlighting the need to be aware of your sleep health, and if something's not right, to seek help and to find those help-seeking pathways. And we will send out some resources and things. So we're now going to move into a sort of a Q&A session, and I'd encourage everybody to put any questions they have for our panel into the chat, because we're more than happy to answer questions. So feel free to pop them in there. We did have some questions that also came from our registration. When you registered, you could ask questions. So I've got a question here that I'm going to ask to Di. So the question, Di, is: do you think sleep disorders like narcolepsy without cataplexy and idiopathic hypersomnia are underdiagnosed? Do you happy to chat about that?
Yeah, absolutely. with narcolepsy type 2 and idiopathic hypersomnia, it can be harder to diagnose because they don't have cataplexy as well. And plus the fact there's a lot of symptom overlap. And even for myself, I didn't mention earlier, I was initially diagnosed with narcolepsy type 2 because I didn't think that I had cataplexy. And it wasn't until late 2018 that I had weaned myself off of the antidepressant medications because, I had this answer finally, and I was preparing to participate in a medication trial for the once a night sodium oxybate, which is now known as Lumryx. So I had to be off of the antidepressant, and straight away, boom, my cataplexy returned, and like the memories came flooding back, the buckling knees and the drooping head and all these sorts of things, and my twitching things that would happen to me or I'd be holding a drink and talking to somebody and they'd make me laugh and I'd just throw my drink on them, like without being able to stop it. It was really embarrassing. So all these things came back. So then it was very obvious, yes, I do have cataplexy, and the diagnosis was changed. So without having something obvious like that, it can be very difficult, and it takes years to get diagnosed. And even harder for IH, because a lot of people still don't even recognize that as being a thing, when it really is a thing. Their sleepiness is way out of control all the time. Yeah.
Do you want to just quickly explain? You have sort of explained cataplexy with your examples there, but do you just want to give a quick definition of it, because it's probably something that people might not have heard of before?
Well, some people will have a full body episode, so it's brought on by tends to be brought on by extreme emotion. So happiness, laughter, shock, if you're surprised, you're caught off guard on something, extreme sadness, that sort of thing. And it's that involuntary loss of muscle tone. So some people have partial cataplexy episodes, so it might just be the head nodding or the knees buckling, that sort of thing, and others just drop to the floor. They can't stop it. They just drop to the floor. You're not unconscious. You're fully awake. You're aware of everything that's going on around you. And it only lasts, well, for some people, a few seconds. Occasionally, there might be some people that last a little bit longer. But then people panic because they think that you've had some sort of a fit or you've fainted or whatever. And but no, it's nothing like that at all. It's just this loss of control. But once it comes back again, gradually, then you can sort of get back up again and regain yourself, and unless, of course, the next joke comes.
Must be such an unusual feeling. Yeah, thank you.
You tend to dull your emotions when you have cataplexy on purpose, because you want to avoid having anything happen. But only last year I experienced, I don't have the full body very often, but I experienced a full body cataplexy attack from emotions of absolute overwhelming pride and joy on my daughter's wedding day. It dropped me to the ground and I fell badly and ended up fracturing my foot at her wedding before the ceremony.
Oh, gosh.
But I stayed.
Yeah. Oh, dear. Yeah.
I wasn't leaving my daughter's wedding for anything. I mean,
No.
my only daughter. So, yeah, it's not good.
No. Oh, well, thank you for sharing all of that with us. It's, really interesting to hear more about it. I don't know if anybody else here has got any more questions. There was a few other questions I thought were interesting in the registrations about menopause. So I wondered whether people wanted to talk a little bit more about menopause and the effects of menopause on sleep. I'm not sure if our 3 panel members are happy to talk about that or not. That's up to you. But if anybody does want to share anything about the impacts of, menopause on sleep and what happened for them, that would be great. But that's fine if you'd prefer not to too. Di? Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there. So with my narcolepsy, I found that the changes in hormones throughout my life. So whenever I was having a period, like leading up to that, my sleep, my sleepiness during the day would become a lot worse. While I was going through perimenopause as well, I had a lot more. That was the time when my symptoms became so out of control that I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to find out what was going on here. And then, of course, the whole menopause thing is, I'm finding it more so, it increases the insomnia part for me. So I've found it harder once I was going through the actual menopause is one day, really. So post-menopause, it can be harder for me to wind down and go to sleep at night, whereas normally I'd just go to bed and fall asleep, or I'll just fall asleep on the couch and not be able to make my way to the bed, So that's been my experience with it.
Yeah. Okay. Rebecca, did you want to talk about menopause as well?
Yeah, so I'm going through perimenopause, which is that lead up to menopause. I have actually just started a few months ago taking progesterone to help balance things out as the hormones change. And I notice a huge difference. Like I just take, I think it's one tablet, 100 micrograms, milligrams, whatever it is. And that I have found if I forget it and skip a night, my sleep is a lot more broken and I do wake up a lot more compared to when I take it. I find I have a more constant sleep. So I would have been one of these ones that go, it's not going to make that much difference. But I have found for me, for myself, that, yeah, just that little bit of extra progesterone from sort of day 7 to 25, I think I take it. It makes a huge difference with me being able to sleep all the way through. So yeah, so I think it does impact on us, and yeah, everybody's different, but that might be something that somebody out there, if they're waking up lots or not sleeping really well, it might be worth a conversation to see whether there's something like that.
Thanks, Beck. Yeah, that's a good reminder that everybody's different and the experiences of everybody through, perimenopause and menopause will be different for everybody. So I think that's a good reminder, and it's interesting to hear even just a couple of different stories. Yeah. Charlotte, did you want to ask that other question?
Yeah, and reminder to anyone as well, anyone joining to pop anything in the chat as well. Um, ask any questions for panelists, anything that's sparked your interest in the stories or any concerns you've got. Um, Another one that came through when people were registering was around what medications or strategies, any techniques, what have you tried and found successful, or more importantly, sometimes what's failed, and how long did you persist with things in order to find that sort of perfect fit? Yeah, Di.
Okay, well, yeah, I can talk about that one as well. Gee, it'll turn into the Dice Show in a minute. Okay, so initially I mentioned earlier that I tried dexamphetamine. That gave me energy, but it didn't really help with my alertness, my sleepiness sort of thing. So I could be energetic, but still really quite sleepy. Bizarre. Modafinil I was originally on, and I had to have that increase until I'd got to 400 milligrams a day. And at that stage, it was making me angry. That was the side effects I was experiencing then. So that wasn't good. So then I was switched to Navigil, and I find that a lot better. But I take that in combination with Vyvanse, because I also have ADHD. I'm able to access that on PBS. So otherwise, I would have to pay for that on a private script. And I also have a top up of Ritalin. So depending on, I take one in the morning to sort of, because the other medications take a little bit of time to kick in. So the Ritalin is the instant release to sort of help to try and get me functioning and out of bed. And then in the afternoon, I take another couple, depending on what I've got to do. I've got to plan things around what I've got to do and how long I need to be able to function for. So yeah, that's what I've tried. Obviously, I also have planned naps during the day to help me to get through. And that helps, but it only helps if I limit my nap to 20-30 minutes absolute maximum. If I go over that, I wake up feeling worse than before I went to and had the nap, and that's only because I'm dreaming, so it's active again. So I'm just making my brain more tired the longer that I stay asleep during that nap. So yeah, it's just a real hit and miss. Every day can be different. I can take all of my medications, as I've mentioned, first thing in the morning, and then go back to sleep and wake up at dinner time. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's a really good point that we think about medications for sleep disorders, but then there's the side effects of the medications and the sort of chasing of side effects, and that's a really big impact on people's lives on its own,
Yeah,
even if
and the
we're
dry
managing the
mouth that you
symptoms.
get, and because
Mm.
of that, I've had a lot of problems with my teeth now. So I've lost teeth. They've just going, yeah, the medication isn't good on your teeth, so which isn't nice, because I did have quite nice teeth before before I started taking all of these medications. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, ongoing things that can happen to you. It's not good.
yeah. Beck or Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to add for that one?
I tried things like yoga, Pilates. I tried exercising more, and yeah, napping less is really good. I did try things like sleeping tablets, which I needed to use at first. That would guarantee me at least 4 hours of solid sleep. Um, but then obviously you don't want to go on that long term. And now I just use them very intermittently. I also tried medicinal cannabis, and I found that quite calming. So when I was in a really heightened state, I found that quite calming. And just at night, like, and just make sure you don't drive after that. I mean, you can drive if you got a certificate, but it's not ideal. Um, but yeah, I think it's a combination of finding what works for you and yeah, just keep trying all different things. And if you can keep it up, and I something that's sustainable for me is going for a walk most mornings, and ideally with a coffee and a friend.
Yeah, great. Um, there's a question in the chat around OSA presenting differently in women, which I mentioned earlier when we are talking, but then also, Beck, you've brought up as well that those different symptoms. I was wondering if you, Beck, wanted to speak to your experience of those different symptoms from having OSA, but then also if you, when you're talking to, clients and fitting CPAPs and things, if you notice any differences between males and females.
Um, it's mainly like the cliche, the snoring for the guys seems to be the big one. For women, it's been things like headaches. I had a client that suffered headaches for 5 years, done heaps of testing, and basically just, she'd been ended up told that it was just her, live with it type thing. And then she got tested for OSA, put her onto CPAP, and she rang me 3 days later and said, I don't have a headache today. And so for her, that was life changing. She said she'd lived with a headache for 5 years, unexplained. And this is why I go back to, like, with me with my muscle aches. I'd seen so many specialists and been tested for MS and, all these autoimmune conditions, and they're just like, we can't find anything to explain why you've got this muscle pain. Um, Fibromyalgia was the last thing that was bantered around. But yeah, so it can just be things like people also say it's the brain fog that they suddenly everything gets clearer. I've got a lot of people that will sit there and tell me, I don't have any symptoms. They do a CPAP trial because their GP has said, we want you to do it. And at the end of the trial, they've gone, well, blow me down. I did have symptoms, but I just thought that was normal. I think that's
Mm.
what Di said. This is normal, what everybody feels. And so yeah, there's a lot of that. So yeah, so it's just as I said, yeah, it's sore throat, the headaches. Headaches seems to be a big one for women. Even things like just being lightheaded when they first wake up in the morning is another one that I tend to find that's more a woman's symptom versus the men. Men, I generally find they will just tell me they're tired and they fall asleep while watching movies. So, so yeah, but yeah, like I think Di was saying, it is the wording. I got told the same thing. You're a mother of young children. That's why you're tired and are falling asleep. And, because I used to complain about that. I'd fall asleep while the kids were watching Play School, and 2 hours later, I'd wake up and, didn't realise any time had gone by. And it's, oh, you're a mum of young children. Of course you're tired. So yeah, so that's what I just said there. It's it's just the persevering with going, no, I don't think this is normal. And yeah, looking it out. But yeah, so they're sort of the main things. Snoring is a symptom, but you can snore without having obstructive sleep apnea, and you can have obstructive sleep apnea and not snore. So yeah, but I know that's the main one that people go, oh, that's what you look for, but it's not really.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Beck. I might throw to Sharon.
Yeah, Charlotte, I've got a question for the group. Anyone who would like to, I know you've all experienced the journey of trying to work out what was going on, and then that protracted experience, sometimes seeing several different types of health professionals along the way, and accumulating different diagnoses potentially along the way, including mental health related ones potentially. What was the tipping point or the opportunity where you managed to actually shift that siloed approach? Or do you have any comments about the siloing, perhaps across the different health service types as well? What was the point, of when they listened to you, when you felt that you were actually getting somewhere?
I mentioned earlier how I had that improvement with trialing modafinil. So then I mentioned that to my neurologist, who then sent me to be tested. But what I didn't mention was I had an overnight sleep study earlier, before the one that led to my diagnosis, because I've always snored, and I thought that perhaps I had sleep apnea. And I mentioned that to my GP, who was excellent. She was very supportive throughout the entire journey with me. I'm very lucky to have her. And it turned out that I didn't then. And when I got the results back and I saw the specialist at that hospital where I had the testing done, he basically said, no, you don't have it. Lose some weight, stop smoking, and you'll be fine. No other investigation whatsoever.
So you went back, you kept going back
I had
to
to
your
go
GP.
back, and then it wasn't until that slight improvement with the modafinil that I then got sent back again. Yeah, so that was frustrating, because I could have potentially been diagnosed that little bit earlier again. So there were those missed opportunities that become very frustrating.
Yeah, and it's interesting, GPs are they're generalists, so they will keep hanging in there and persisting with you.
Look, she was amazing, because this ended up costing me my job. I had a great job. I loved my job. I'd been there for 15 years, and it eventually cost me my job because they were on my back trying to get me back to work. And I kept saying, I just can't. I don't know why I can't. I just can't. And she was siding with me, and I was being sent to the specialist through my work, and they're saying, oh, no, no reason why she can't return to work. So yeah, very, very frustrating time.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Di. Now we're on time, so I'm going to hand back, unless I'll hand over to Moira and Jenny. Apologies, Lisa and Beck, on the last question.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharon. And yeah, we are at time, but I just thought I still want to have a minute just to have appropriate amount of thank yous. And yeah, I've been riveted and moved by your stories. Thank you so much. Thanks To our panelists, Beck, Di, and Lisa, you've very articulately and generously shared your experiences. They were raw, they were real, reminding us that sleep, well-being, and gender and health are not abstract concepts, but lived realities that shape our lives daily. So can't thank you enough. So my takeaways were that we do have a siloed health system. We've got a long way to go with the education and awareness of sleep and sleep disorders and education of healthcare professionals. The differences between men and women and the symptoms, we have to act on that. We've got to change our website for that. Language around sleepy and tired, those issues I've known as a clinician a long time. We need to emphasise that more on our website and really get that access to treatments front and centre as well. And Lisa, that increased awareness of domestic and family violence and the impact on sleep and our nervous system, and using new terms like sleep abuse and the body keeps the score, indeed. So they're things that I've really taken on and we'll act on. So because your stories help us to broaden our understanding in ways that research alone or awareness campaigns from us alone could never do. So I want to close our session with a very big thanks to all involved. Jenny and Liv have been incredibly thoughtful, organised and diligent in coordinating this, so thank you. Thanks to our compassionate hosts, Jenny, Charlotte and Sharon. And finally, thank you to the audience. As I said, your presence is what gives this conversation purpose. I want you to get checked for sleep disorders, especially if there are unexplained symptoms. So with that, we'll bring the session to a close. Please take care of yourselves, rest well when you can, aim for optimal sleep and continue these conversations in your communities. So seek help, speak up, and thanks again.